name is Jackie Gerard.
My name is Juan Pablo Gutierrez. And my name is Derek McDaniel. We're Team 9, and we're going to be talking about construction post-disaster. Disaster scenarios are wide-ranging and often unavoidable. They can include anything from human-caused disasters such as war or terror attacks, fire, and technological failures like nuclear power plant meltdowns, or they can be natural disasters such as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, typhoons, or monsoons, just to name a few. While measures can be taken pre-disaster to mitigate damage from future disasters, no city or country can be fully prepared to withstand damage from such disasters. On average, natural and man-made disasters cause approximately $24 billion worth of damage and affect the lives of 60 million people around the world every year. Post-disaster construction is vital for the recovery and reconstruction of communities affected by disastrous events. This graphic shows the current timeline for disaster response and recovery. The emergency stage right after disaster occurs can last up to 2 weeks, depending on the disaster. Over the course of a few months, damaged property is patched up and normal activity starts to resume in the community. After about a year, the community is back to the same level of development as pre-disaster. Over the next decade, the community improves upon itself. Throughout this whole timeline, the community experiences high levels of reconstruction activity. This process has been refined from the experiences of different communities throughout history. One example of improvement in disaster recovery lies in the comparison between the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986 and the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. After the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl failed, authorities did not have the resources in place to contain the fallout. The surrounding areas were quickly affected by radiation and had to be evacuated. Chernobyl sat vacant for years before cleanup efforts began. Chernobyl is only habitable as of recently, at least 30 years later. On the other hand, after the Fukushima disaster in 2011, efforts to contain contamination began immediately, and cleanup has been ongoing over the past decade. While nuclear disasters can devastate communities for decades, regardless of the cleanup efforts, the responders in the Fukushima disaster learned from the disaster in Chernobyl by responding to the disaster quicker. This should shorten the recovery time for Fukushima in comparison to Chernobyl.
Now that we mentioned a few cases in which we have really good infrastructure and really good reaction time, we need to talk about a few countries with a really small budget and a really bad infrastructure. So to understand the construction industry impact, we're going to Managua during 1972. During this time, Nicaragua suffered one of the most destructive earthquakes in its history. We're talking about 6.2 in Richter scale. This earthquake had a absolutely strong impact towards the infrastructure and everything in the city, like buildings, bridges, roads, everything was totally destroyed. We were talking about absolute destruction of a city. So a few politics decided to start a movement that was going to try to move the city to a different location. We're talking about moving a whole capital to a different location and restart again. That's how tough the image was for people from Nicaragua. But then due to politics and expenses, they decided to just keep the city in the same location and have no change in infrastructure or in advances towards disaster prevention. From my opinion, the movement that was trying to move the city was trying not only to move the city to a different location, but restart the city with different prevention methods, a better infrastructure, stronger infrastructure, and stronger buildings. But then most companies, they were fighting for the main and remaining contracts that remained for the infrastructure of the city, and this caused a contract war that led towards corruption and led towards a destroying country. Life after the earthquake was really hard for people in Nicaragua. We're talking about 80% of infrastructure of the city was destroyed. So the investment that was coming towards the reconstruction had to be really, really big. The only difference was that in this case, there was no change in budget towards the relocation and reconstruction of different buildings. So basically they decided to just keep the buildings with a few facade issues and a few holes all over the structure, and they kept them for years. Now we go to Colombia, which is also considered a third world country, and we go to 2017, a more recent time, and we're going to explore the tragedy of Mocoa, in which like a landslide that was caused by water, rain, and erosion killed 300 people and totally destroyed 12 neighborhoods, one of the most important hydroelectric generators in the country, and a few aqueducts. So after the tragedy in Mocoa, a few different countries decided to donate money towards the help of the people and the reconstruction of the city. The Colombian government invested $9,000 million, while the Coca-Cola company invested $200,000, China $1 million, Spain $1,700,000, US $200,000, Korea $300,000, Germany 300,000 euros, and other countries donated between 800,000 and 7 million. After the money was well used, an absolutely new city was in the plan. We have new infrastructure, we have new bridges, new roads, new everything. This was supposed to take 3 years, but due to corruption and a few other factors like landslide that kept occurring, it's been 4 years and the city is still under development. But like in general, there's been a few improvements in houses and roads and schools, and they've created like artificial schools for students so they can go and they can continue with their lives even though they don't have any type of backup in terms of infrastructure or in terms of housing. The new advances in prediction natural disasters is allowing companies to be prepared for more efficient and faster reaction. There's research all along the world trying to find more efficient ways to predict where and when disasters will occur. Not only this, but there's huge impact coming towards the industry because we have global warming happening, and there's going to be a huge difference due to water levels, and construction in post-disaster is going to have a huge role because we're going to see total cities being totally destroyed due to water and increase of water levels from rivers or big bodies of water.
One challenge associated with construction and post-disaster is the funding of the projects. Construction is typically funded through nonprofit organizations, through donations, or international organizations. The numerous sources make communication and organization difficult at times. Each group may have a unique objective, including accounting requirements or expected timeframes. If each organization uses funding to fill their own agendas, the project will be hastily completed. Because of the numerous parties involved, the affected country may have little to no control over how funds are spent. The increase in funding to the location may cause local price inflation, which would ultimately affect the quality and duration of the final project. Government assistance may be an issue in construction post-disaster. The government should be able to choose organizations that assist in rebuilding the affected area. However, numerous disasters occur in areas where the government is corrupt. Because of this, the government may choose organizations that align with their beliefs, leave the community in the dark, or spend any received money elsewhere. Mobilization is another challenge that may arise. Without protective equipment, companies may be unable to reach their devastated areas. Additionally, companies may put employees at a high risk by requiring their services in such areas. KPIs, or key performance indicators, measure how effectively a company is achieving a business objective. The first KPI that we will discuss is safety. The chart on the left helps visualize how dangerous an environment may be. Companies must take precautions to ensure their employees avoid such risks. Several unknown hazards are present post-disaster, and the companies working in such areas are often unaware of safety practices, so the risk is great. While some companies may progress hastily through the construction to produce a finished product, extensive consultation is needed. First, all buildings must protect from whatever disaster just occurred. This means the structure should be sturdy and built from appropriate materials. Internal comfort, including the size of the building and the security factor, must be considered. Individuals affected by the disaster may be traumatized by the event. Their home may have been demolished, so considering the happiness and safety of the community is important. It is crucial to follow a timeline in post-disaster construction. Companies are not just finishing a product, but they are building a new sense of normalcy in the affected areas. Companies need to be aware of how all inputs impact their schedule and plan for additional unknowns.
In conclusion, we can say that a good reconstruction or good construction in post-disaster leads towards a better infrastructure, lower mortality rates, stronger communities. But we also need to understand that reconstruction is not just a physical thing. We're not just rebuilding a city. We're not just rebuilding a building. We're actually rebuilding communities. We're rebuilding families, and we're trying to help people overcome extreme loss and pain. Therefore, we need to try to rebuild our lives, and we need to try to make it better for them.